Okay. It is 7 o'clock, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. And first, I'd like to invite all of you to join me for a Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So welcome everybody that's here this evening and also watching on YouTube later on. Just a friendly reminder, if you have electronic devices, cell phones or otherwise, please put them on airplane mode, turn them off or on silent so they don't disrupt our meeting here. So first I'd like to make a few introductions. I'm going to start over here on that end. We have sitting in the first row our Public Works Superintendent, Gary Peters, and then we have our Director of Administration, Cassandra Tabor, our City Clerk, Kris Linquist, and then with WSB, our City Engineer is Alyson Fauske, and then we have Council Members Shannon, John Tschumperlin, Mike Molitor, Pam Mortenson. I'm Lisa Whalen, I'm the Mayor, and then to my right, our City Administrator, Mike Barone. Brian Grimm is our Finance Director. Sitting in for Community Development Director David Abel this evening is our Planner, Nick Olson. David is on vacation. And then we have our City Attorney with Kennedy and Graven, Ron Batty, and then we have our Chief of Police, Paul Falls. So with that, are there any additions or changes to the agenda? If not, then is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion has been made by Ms. Bruce and seconded by Mr. Tschumperlin. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes 5-0. So we'll move on to our special presentations. Ms. Tabor.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of the council, just a quick adjustment here. We were introducing 2 new city employees, but one of our employees, Gary Nelson, had a family emergency at the end of the day, so we'll see him probably at the next council meeting. With that being said, Kris is behind me, so Kris, I'll have you find your way up to the front and just I'll give you a brief introduction. But Kris Sandberg joined us at the end of June as a Public Works employee. If you recall, we did 2 rounds of hiring before we were able to find Kris, which is fantastic. He worked for the city of Chanhassen for just under 2 years and is a Minnetrista resident looking to get closer to home.
Yes.
So,
yes, ma'am.
turn over to Kris.
Thank you all for the opportunity. I'm really happy to be here.
And how do you like it so far?
A lot.
Good. And your boss is sitting right over there, and all of us here, so he knows what to say. Well, welcome on board. We're glad to have you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So, thank
Did
you.
your boss tell you you're supposed to wear a tuxedo tonight?
I know, a top hat, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's Gary's running joke.
All right.
Thanks, Kris.
Thank you for coming. We appreciate it. It's always good to put a name with a face and have that personal contact, so thank you. So our next item is a special presentation by S.E.H. for our water tower update. Mr. Miles Jensen is with us, and also Chad, what's your last name again? Katzenberg, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Whalen, council, staff. So Chad and I are here today just to touch base with you on the beginning of the project. So just to let you know where we're at. And so we really have 2 things to share with you. One is the site layout that we're considering, and then the other is the schedule. So Chad's going to talk about the schedule.
Sure. So we've got a preliminary schedule laid out here for the project. And as you might expect, this being a water tower project, they are quite lengthy, just the nature of the construction and staging and our Minnesota weather kind of extends the work for these particular projects out quite a bit. So if we start at the top of the schedule, we're well into preliminary design where we're laying out the initial site, figuring out how things are going to fit, so on and so forth. We look to move into final design into the fall here in September, and then finish up final design into November and move into the bidding of the project. We would look to award the bid after we've secured a contractor in January. From there, being where we would be in the middle of winter, we'd start working towards shop drawing review and reviewing proposed project features with the contractor and approving those. We would expect them to begin their shop fabrication of the water tower during that period. Into the spring of 2020, when the initial ground could be broken, foundation on the water tower would be initially constructed. And depending on the style of construction that takes place, additional construction would take place over the summer into the fall. At that point in the project, summer of 2020, we'd be nearing completion of the tank portion of the project. Next comes the paint, which is, of course, a very important piece to any water tower project. That's what protects the water tower for the long run. In Minnesota, we really only get about 4 months for quality painting to occur. So we would expect the painting work would be pushed into spring of 2021. From there, you can see the winter break schedule noted. Basically, the tank would be waiting for paint to be applied, and then completion of the project would happen in the summer of 2021. From there, the paint would cure, tank would be disinfected, and then brought online after everything is complete. So, real quick, brief overview of what this process will look like over time. Initially, the design will bring forth preliminary design and final design documents before it goes to bid. But I guess with that, does anyone have any questions in regards to the schedule and the construction process?
I do, and I'm not so sure if it's going to be for you, Kris or Mike. Are we able to kind of, within the schedule, interlay what steps the council needs to take? If we're doing, obviously we have to award the contract. We've got to do, we've got a bond referendum somewhere in there. There's some other steps there. It's probably not a discussion for tonight, but it would be kind of helpful to see what steps we have to take as a council to help facilitate this schedule. I don't know if you're ready to speak to that or if you need more time for that.
Yeah, and that's something we can certainly coordinate.
Yep, we can work together with S.E.H. and bring something back, so whenever there's a touch point for the council, we can kind of give you an idea of when that's going to be. Obviously, the first one will be the contract, but
Right.
yeah.
Well, don't we have to approve the design? I think so.
That's
Final plans and specifications, and then
Right.
the contract. And then,
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was asking.
Yeah.
I have a question. As a council, I know we have a contract with S.E.H. to do what they're doing. But as a council, have we voted as a council? I don't remember voting as a council to actually say we're going to build a water tower. And so I agree with Mike. I think or Councilman Molitor, we need council steps in here that officially are taken, because I know this council has never voted to begin building a water tower, and I think that is probably a step that needs to be recorded somewhere.
Well, I think that step was taken a number of years ago by a previous council when we entered into this whole water infrastructure improvements. We approved a contract with S.E.H. to do 3 things. One is to build 2 water treatment plants. The second was to connect the 2 south and central system with a water main project. And the third was to do this particular step. So I believe that's already been approved by a city council. Maybe not this council, but since it's been about 3 years or 2-3 years.
Well, but it seems to me like if we're about to embark on building a water tower, this council ought to be part of that approval process.
Well, we would be approving the design.
Right, so
And
I'm
we've
just
already
saying,
approved the purchase of the.
I agree with Councilmember Molitor that
Right.
we need our council's steps in
Sure.
here. So we're voting on things and approving things officially along the way.
Yep.
Yeah, I kind of think like I said, the city council, it's who we report to. We don't know who the 5 people are, but we report to you after any given election. But, we've got our orders from a city council of Minnetrista to do this project. And I certainly agree that we can obviously keep you up to date, but I think an actual vote on the water tower has been done already, so.
But we
to do
can add those different steps, or maybe just put next to these steps when council approval is. However, having said that, I'm assuming too, we will be kept apprised on a monthly basis, whatever, in terms of the progress as well.
Certainly.
So not only just when we need to make a council decision or approval, but also just keeping us apprised of as the project goes along. I think that would be good.
Certainly.
All right.
Yeah, we can't do anything without your approval anyway, so,
Yeah.
so you guys are going to get a chance to say
Right.
yes or no on whatever it is.
All right. Okay.
And, Miles was just
All right.
review the initial site plan a little bit with everyone.
So this is the site plan, and it's a little bit different from what I think I shared with you before. Not particularly different, but so here's the proposed water tower and the well. We're still keeping up in the northeast corner. We met with staff a couple weeks back to get an idea of what sort of driveway we were looking at, and so it's a very simple, just straight in driveway with a little hammerhead there on the side, or to be able to back a vehicle around and drive back out. The treatment plant is just shown there as being a future, as is the well, but we're still wanted to make sure that we were, having the right amount of space. I thought this was kind of interesting. If you can follow this line here, but this is the wetland that was delineated. And wow, I didn't really think it was going to be that big. So it was, are you sure? Throw those flags back. No, I didn't say that. Anyways, so it works out okay. And then what I asked our planners to do is to show under current rules what the infiltration would be needed. This would be the one for the hardscape that is created under this project, and this one here is would be for future for this building here. So we're not planning to do this piece at this time because the rules change and it might move and all sorts of things, but I again, mostly this is just to let you know it all fits and stuff like that. And then if you can flip to the next.
But the one you are going to be installing with the water tower, the narrow one on the west side.
Yeah, I believe this is the intended one here that our civil folks chose. And then if you could flip to the next one. So it's oriented north is to the right, but just to show you how the access drive actually looks, coming up to the site. So I thought that was kind of interesting too. But it's proposed that just the first part here will be paved for vehicles coming on and off of Highway 7, but then this will be gravel.
Mm-hmm.
So and that's it. So if you drive by the site, I think you'll see there's some stakes out there now for soil boring. Soil boring work will start next week, I believe, and then you may see our surveyors out there picking up the ditch here down to the water main. So.
And Mr. Jensen, also, I know staff had met with the adjacent property owner, the Turks, and they were concerned about water runoff and onto their property. Will that be addressed now, or when will you be addressing that?
So if you go back to, if you can flip back to this, you can see that we're already taking that into account, and the design requirements are anything, our hard pan, added runoff now to the existing site is what you're required to capture
Okay.
and treat, and so that's what's being proposed here.
Okay.
Does that size of that pond depend on whether it's gravel or bituminous?
I think we can ask Alyson that. I think gravel and bituminous are the same, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we, in the future, decided to pave that road, we wouldn't have to expand the,
Typically not. You would see the same runoff generated from a gravel surface than with a bituminous surface.
okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you.
We will see
Very-
you next month.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so next we'll move on to persons to be heard. We have, so you signed up to speak for regarding the doll variance. Would you like to speak during that item? Because you can speak during that agenda item.
That would be great.
Okay. All right. So we'll move on to our consent agenda items. They consist of approve our work session meeting minutes from July 15th, 2019, approve our regular meeting minutes from July 15th, 2019, approve our claims, approve the purchase of 2 squads for the Public Safety Department, and a resolution to approve the change order number 1 for 2019 Street Improvement Project CP 01-19, and then approve a license agreement for Brian Johnson at 6690 Game Farm Road East. Any ones you want to remove?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to remove item B, regular minutes.
Okay. Any other ones? With that, then we are approving A, C, D, E, and F, as I just read. Any other questions? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve those consent agenda items?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion has been made by Ms. Mortenson and seconded by Mr. Tschumperlin to approve consent agenda items A, C, D, E, and F. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes 5-0. Ms. Bruce?
On page 13 of our packet and the minutes in the council reports, under my council report, it says missed the St. Bonnie Fire Advisory Meeting. Could you just note there that everyone missed the St. Bonnie Fire Advisory Meeting? It wasn't just me, because nobody got the memo. And it just sounds like I missed the meeting. Thanks.
Okay, any other changes? Otherwise, is there a motion to approve with that change?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, motion has been made by Ms. Bruce and seconded by Ms. Mortenson to approve the minutes with that one change. Any further questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes 5-0. We have no public hearings this evening, so we'll move on to business items. First item is to approve the setback variance at 4890 Red Oak Lane for dolls, and there's also approve a setback variance at 4896 Red Oak Lane for the Louch. Mr. Olson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, Member of Council. This item before you this evening is a variance request. The first one is at 4890 Red Oak Lane for William and Susan Dahl. The request is to the rear yard setback. They're looking to have a reduction in the required 25 down to 20 feet. That would allow them to construct a deck onto the house. The applicants are proposing a deck that is 12 feet deep, which would encroach by that 5 feet into the setback, which is required by, or which requires the variance request here. I'll go a little bit back into it. Council probably remembers the PUD amendment application that was brought before them, because there was a few properties that kind of were facing similar issues, whether it was hardcover or setbacks. So we thought it made sense to go with the PUD amendment. Ultimately, that was withdrawn by the applicants, and the discussion amongst the council was kind of to follow the variance process. So that's what we've done here. As we followed the variance process, you know, that includes the public hearing held by the Planning Commission, and it includes public notice to people within 500 feet. So that was all done in accordance with the ordinance and with state statute. The Planning Commission held a public hearing at their July meeting, and the summary of the motion from that meeting was included with your packet item, as well as the many comments that were received both before and at the meeting by various residents, all who were in support of the request of the dolls. So with that being said, I won't go too much into detail unless the council does have questions, but the Planning Commission did recommend unanimously to approve the setback variance. I believe the motion was 6-0. We did have a couple of absences. So therefore, we will carry that recommendation forward, and the recommendation would be to approve the setback variance request, subject to certain conditions in your staff report, and based on those findings of fact as well. So we do have our applicants here this evening if the council would wish to ask them questions. Otherwise, I am here from staff for questions as well.
Okay. Would the applicant like to make some comments? Just come to the podium. You need to state your, well, we have her name and address already, so just state your name.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members. We are Bill and Sue Dahl. We live at 4890 Red Oak Lane. We moved here from Sioux Falls, South Dakota a little over a year ago. We are the ones who had our deck building permit denied on May 1st and learned that there were setback issues in the neighborhood. We've been told that you would have all seen and had time to go over our variance application and the accompanying letter that we wrote over a month ago. Also, we won't attempt to cover all those main points. We would like to bring up a couple other points for your consideration. Mr. Olson just addressed the issue that there are only 2 properties now for various reasons that are of concern with the setbacks for decks. Some of them were ground level, some didn't have buildings on them yet, so they could go with a smaller footprint. It's just the 2 that are being considered tonight that are left. Our home is the only one, actually, of all the original 9, that has patio doors 10 feet above grade. The others were ground level or a couple feet, or there were a few at 7 feet. I'm jumping over some things that Nick said, so I don't have to repeat them. I guess the main point of that is that this should alleviate the concerns voiced at the June 17th council meeting about this being the tip of the iceberg, that we're going to have 1 or 2 variance requests, for the next year because of all these other lots. There really are just these 2 now. And Nick can speak more accurately, if necessary, to the reason that those other 7 are not a concern anymore. It was also stated during the June council meeting that we knew what the rules were when we bought the house. That just plain isn't true. We had seen and liked a 1-level living model in Otsego during the 2017 Fall Parade of Homes. We'd come, I think, for 3 or 4 of those weekends to stay with our son in Plymouth. He wanted us to move closer to him. We had, in the last year and a half before that, lost over 12 family members, and we wanted to be closer to our family. So we're looking for places close to our son here. The other one lives on the East Coast, and we don't want to live in DC. So we visited Red Oak, which was closer to our son, and it seemed like a nice neighborhood. Knew nothing of the history. I'd never heard of Minnetrista before, sorry. The first thing we asked was what lots the Clearwater model would fit on. That's the 1-level living model we'd seen up in Otsego, and our son said we don't want to be across 494 from them. We'd never be able to get together for a quick meal or anything because of the traffic. So we walked in, I believe it was Sunday, September 24th in 2017, and we chose our lot based on the recommendation that they gave us where that Clearwater model would fit. On that first visit, we had asked them to finish our downstairs level and to build a deck and have it included in the total price of our home, but we were told that they didn't build decks. During that same discussion that Sunday, it was suggested that we upgrade to a triple-wide patio door for access to a substantial deck that we were encouraged to add on that size of house because it would be a finished 4-bedroom house with potential for adding 1 more wall and having it be a 5-bedroom house. The survey provided to us did not show setbacks, and they were never mentioned during the buying process. We've read through all the literature. I don't throw anything away. I'm very careful about paperwork, too much, I think. In a planned community where the land was owned and the specific house models were being offered and built by the same company and being, 12-hour round-trip drive to come, we did most of our paperwork and everything by email and e-signing or whatever on the computer, and came when we had to make the next decisions. We trusted that because the land ownership, the house models, and the building would be by the same company, we trusted that the lots, home models, and room for appropriate decks, where they were obviously meant to be, had all been carefully designed by the builder and approved by the city. Also, please keep in mind that the house of our closest neighbor across from our backyard, talking about concerns of the neighborhood, is 157 feet from our house. And there are many trees that almost completely obscure sight lines in the summer. There are some pictures in your packet. I don't remember what got put in the packet. I have a whole bunch of extra documentations and pictures that if questions arise, I'd be happy to share later. Looking directly at a deck straight on from even half that distance, one would only see the fascia and railing and couldn't tell if it were a 7-foot or a 16-foot wide deck out from the house, as we've noticed looking at a recently built deck out our front windows across the street from us. Because we walked over there and measured it, and we were surprised because all we could see was the railing in the front. I don't think it's going to affect anybody, and you can tell by the public hearing that we have the support of the neighborhood, the Red Oak neighborhood. There was a lot of talk at the June meeting, which we've watched several times, and we appreciate your concerns and your questions at that meeting. I do think that Red Oak is a better community because of the concerns of the council at that time, which I understand was all different people, but I've spent a lot of nights when I couldn't sleep, all this running through my head online reading the history of the neighborhood. We 100% weren't aware of any of that, and nothing's our fault, even if we were. But I do believe that the city was looking out for the city in the questions and some things that were changed, not quite as many houses and some other things. So I do appreciate the city's work on this. Okay, you'll have to give me a second here. I shouldn't look up and ad lib here because I lose my place. I guess at the June meeting, there was a lot of talk about what hardships we would have. One major factor for us, besides what we wrote in the packet and on the application, besides not having a deck to use where one obviously belongs on that house, we intended to maintain and improve this home so it would sell quickly when we eventually needed to move, where more senior services and care are provided, likely within 12 to 15 years, we figured, when we'll be in our mid-80s. This property was intended to be our tangible asset. It's over twice the house, size-wise and value-wise, as we've ever owned. We were 25 years in Grand Forks and 12 years in Sioux Falls. But we made that decision because we wanted that tangible asset whose equity we could use to finance whatever level of housing and care we would need for the rest of our lives. We are concerned that without a reasonable sized deck for a 4 or 5 bedroom house, potential buyers will keep looking elsewhere for a house, as we would have done if we told we could put a 7-foot deck on there. People aren't going to buy something that isn't right when they don't own it. They're not obligated to it already. When we need to move where some services or senior care are provided, we can't afford to have this home sit on the market for months or years when we'd need to count on that equity for our future housing needs. That could be a disastrous hardship for us. Our home as it sits now has triple wide patio door off our main living area that leads out to nothing but a 10-foot drop to the ground. It's obviously where a reasonable sized deck is intended to be and is a necessary part of this one-level living floor plan. Without a deck big enough for a sitting area, a table to eat at, room for a grill to be used, a safe distance from the house, our home is incomplete, both in appearance and function. We've also been advised to make sure that you're aware that we may not be able to use the same building permit that was submitted the end of April and denied. And I understand that you're not approving the building permit at this time, but I was advised to make sure you were aware of that. Our deck builder has informed us that the 17 steps required to go down 10 feet would extend out a bit more than 12 feet from our house. Unless you can somehow allow a couple extra steps to extend beyond the 12-foot deck width for safe egress off the back of our house, in which case then we could use the original permit application. I mean, that's the part that got included in the packet was the original building permit submitted in April that we didn't know there would be any problem with, so. We can't put those steps on it unless we're allowed to go a little bit beyond the 12 feet. And the builder wasn't able to come tonight. They've spent a lot of time answering my questions, not even knowing if they're gonna be able to get our work yet. Our variance procedure instruction packet starts out by saying the Minnetrista City Code was established to protect both current and future residents from the negative impacts of improper development and to ensure a positive future for the city. This is obviously improper planning and development. Therefore, we're using this variance process requesting setback relief of only another 5 feet to add a reasonable sized deck. Approval would allow us to build and use the deck we were told was possible when we chose our home and lot. There are many more, probably more important points that were on our application in your packet. I won't go over those, but if you have any questions on that or any information tonight, or we have lots of documentation, pictures, and other information with us tonight that we could share with you if it would help answer any questions.
Sure.
So,
Thank you, Mrs. Dahl. Yeah, I'm sure if we have questions. Do you have any questions? No, thank you.
Okay.
All right. Then I'm going to ask Pam Christensen if you'd like to come at this time. You do need to state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. Thanks for the work that you do here in watching the online video. Since we were out of town for the last meeting, it just brings home how much effort and time you guys put into all this, which is so important for city planning for the future and for all the many people that you serve. So I really recognize your hard work. So in watching the video, I just want to make a few points of clarification before you make your decision about this variance. And the reason I wanted to clear up some assumptions is that those kinds of statements can affect people's decision making. So some of the assumptions that I heard in the video from the last meeting were that Dahls did know that they had a 25-foot setback. Oh, just so you know, I did write a letter and I submitted my comments, but these are comments specifically related to the video of the last meeting. So you could read my letter and some of my comments there too. But Dahls said that they did not know that there was a 25-foot setback on their lot, and I need to take them at their word, and I would ask that you take them at their word also. Because we, as neighbors, did I say I'm at 4891 Red Oak Lane? I'm really sorry. We are neighbors, but in our seeking process, we were shown lots on the perimeter as well, and there was never a mention of a setback or that being something that we should be thoughtful of when choosing a home or choosing a lot. Certainly not in terms of considering a deck. So I just felt really sad that they weren't being taken at their word. I would want to be taken at my word. And so if they say they didn't know there was a variance, I believe them because we were not told of a variance or a setback. I'm sorry. And another assumption in that conversation was that the choice of the home or the style of the home related to the setback also, and that's just not how it worked for us. That's just not any part of what the conversation was when we were dealing with the salespeople with Lennar. And I also found the comments about they knew and now to come back now because they don't like their situation. I just found those comments very disrespectful and completely inaccurate. If I'm allowed to ask a question to one of the council members, I maybe would consider doing that, but at the end. But I just think it's a good reminder for us to have the idea that we can only speak what we know to be true, and if we don't know the facts, then perhaps we shouldn't be using them as points of influence in helping make someone's decision. So the facts are just really important to me. So I want those kinds of things to be considered before you make a decision on this variance. And also just from the video, it seemed to me from the video that everyone was understanding that a 20-foot setback isn't unreasonable, and then that's been used in a number of different applications. So I think that this is a reasonable request. And we've been homeowners for 40 years around this metro area. And the city planners that, in the meetings that I've been to, and the articles that I've read, and in the participation, we've had city planners do a great job, and they recommend things based on making all the goals work for the city, for people, and for the future. So I just respect the work that they do. And then just that, based on the conversation of the last meeting, I just felt like some of this was unnecessarily delayed, so that's probably part of my question. And mostly my last point is about being a Red Oak participant. I got the impression that Red Oak has taken a long time, and there's been piles of dirt, and I'm learning that this whole development has taken longer than possible, or what they thought. But we as buyers, or we as newcomers to Minnetrista, would have no way of knowing that. And we would have no way of knowing what the difficulties were. And it would be nice to know that Red Oak is not viewed as a problematic neighborhood, or that there's some sort of difficulty going forward, because this might not be the only issue. There might be lots of conversations about Red Oak. So I'd like to think that you know, we're a great development, and the city has an obligation to make sure lots of wonderful living options are there. So this PUD, all the work, all the history, not sure. I can be informed. I'm happy to listen, but we as homeowners or as newcomers have no responsibility for that. And I just feel like in this case, this variance is perfectly reasonable.
Thank you, Ms. Christensen. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, is there anybody else here that would like to make a comment? All right. So with that, thank you for your comments. I think they're well made. So, and I want to make sure that the residents of Red Oak do know that you're welcome here, and that we're glad that you're here. It's not necessarily just the development that makes a community, but it's the people that make a community. And so I've met a lot of people some people in your development that are wonderful people, and so I do think from that perspective, it's a good development. I think just kind of rephrasing it, maybe the development they're very small lots, and they're different from what Minnetrista has been used to. And so along with smaller lots come different types of issues. And we certainly don't want to hold that against you or any resident in Red Oak. So having said that, are there any other comments or questions of the council? No? Okay. With that then, staff is recommending approval of a 5-foot variance for 4890 Red Oak Lane. Is there a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded to approve the setback variance of 5 feet at 4890 Red Oak Lane for the Dolls, and I'm assuming that would include the stipulations that staff made?
As noted.
As noted, okay, thank you. And any further comments or questions?
I do have an additional comment.
Sure.
Just perspective on this in general. Going back to the meeting that we talked about this, as we've done with any variance in the past, and while I've been on the council as well as the planning commission, I think the whole point, or at least for me, wasn't so much as may have been stated here, was the ability to allow those people who are impacted to have a chance to make their voices heard. And I think by having this going through the planning commission and having everyone notified and having the opportunity to be aware, I think is what we try to do in the name of transparency. And I think that was the whole gist of this.
Sure.
And I think that's kind of important to recognize, is that this isn't a vendetta against anybody. This is about following a due process to allow people to have their input. And without that input, it's more difficult for us to make the decision. So I think that's, at least from my perspective, that's what I want to get here is input. And it's great to see that of all the comments, people are in favor of it. So I'm pleased that we've gone through the process and we can at least know now that we've taken the pulse and we've got the pulse, and that was the whole intent. So just want to make that clear.
Well, and to your point too, I think we were somewhat adverse to giving the whole entire Red Oak development basically a variance, and so we wanted to take it on a case-by-case basis. So, but good process, yes, and I think the outcome is the one that's needed. So, with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. All right. So next we have the approval of a setback variance at 4896 Red Oak Lane for the Louch property.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. The request here is also a rear yard setback variance. I'm at 4896 Red Oak Lane for Elliot and Christina Luch.
Okay.
It is again, like I said, 5 foot rear yard setback for a deck. Very similar situation to the Dahl property. However, because they are variance requests, staff has taken them individually on their own merits for review, and that's why the council is being looked at to act on these separately. But I guess in the effort of saving time, like I said, it's a very, very similar request. It's kind of outlined in your staff report. Went through the same process, and the motion from the Planning Commission was for a recommendation of approval, again passing 6-0. Due to a couple absences. So therefore that motion would carry forward, and that would be the recommendation of staff, would be a recommendation of approval for the rear yard setback, subject to certain conditions in the staff report and based on findings of fact. So if you have any questions, I'm here, and I do believe we have one of our applicants here as well.
Okay, Mr. Lush, I'm sorry I mispronounced your name. If you care to come forward and...
Good evening, Madam Mayor. You're not the first, you won't be the last. Mispronounce my name. So thank you to yourself for the time. Council members, thank you. Our situation is identical to the Dahls. We are their neighbor to the south. And I want to take my time to just thank Bill and Sue for all of their efforts in this, and thank our neighbors, the Christensens, and those neighbors that showed up at the planning meeting with this show of support. I guess I will ask you, and to be quick about it, because there isn't anything additional I need to present to you other than what's in your packet, is if you have any questions specific to me on what might differ from our situation. So if there's any questions.
Does council have any questions? I don't think so.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. All right. Any questions of staff? Again, pretty much the same thing. So then is there a motion to approve the setback variance at 4896 Red Oak Lane for the Luch property? Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, a motion has been made by Ms. Bruce, seconded by Ms. Mortenson. Any further questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. One thing I'd just like to mention to staff, and this is for homeowners' protection as well. When a building permit comes in, specifically, and I know we're having one other PUD coming in next month or maybe later on this month, I'd really like to see them have a deck drawn, whether it's going to be built or not, but that gives the homeowners then they know what they can and can't have, and before they start building, they could make adjustments. I think it's really sad when people buy their dream home and then find out afterwards that they have to go through all these hoops to try and get a decent deck on. So I just think that would be especially since we really don't want to have to go through the variance process for the remainder of these lots. If we could do that, I think that would alleviate a lot of hardship and heartache. So.
Sure. Yeah, we will work within our purview to do that.
Okay.
To the best of our abilities.
Good, thank you.
Can I comment on that?
No. Yeah.
One issue I think the staff is probably going to have with that is, it may not be for the upcoming one, but for others, is that buyers have generally, not always, but generally have a choice of models.
Right.
So you'd probably have to put, and I'm just making up a number here, but if there's 5 models to choose from and there's 60 lots,
Right.
that's 300 iterations of what that would look like. Now, maybe you do it simplified and just make sure that any model that's offered would be able to have a deck within the setback requirements. But just want to be clear that it's not just, here's the house, here's the piece of property. There's a lot of different combinations.
No, I know that. But I'm just saying, yeah.
A lot of factors go into it, and some of the difficulties we'll face is obviously we don't know oftentimes who's purchasing a house until the house is built.
Right.
Typically, it's the builder applying for the permit. They fulfill all those obligations, and then the homeowner comes in at closing. So it's going to be difficult to kind of be as transparent as we can with these homeowners. But like I said, within our purview, we will do what we can. When things are close, we'll make note to call them out.
Yeah, because we sit up here, some of us have been on the planning commission, some of us have been here, some of us are planners, so we know there's setbacks, but you know what? The average person probably doesn't. I mean,
Yep.
I know we think they should, but they don't know. So if we can help them along and kind of educate them on what they can and can't do, that I think that would be great. Anyhow, so with that, we'll move on to our next business item, and that's approve a work order for Halsted Drive Street Improvement Project. I believe that's Ms. Fauske.
Yes, Madam Mayor, thank you. Madam Mayor, members of the council, before you this evening is work order 4 for the Halsted Drive project. As indicated in the memo, the work was done between July and September of 2018 relating to relocation of a hydrant, some insulation that was necessary in order to ensure adequate insulation between the top of the ground surface and the hydrant lead, the pipe leading from the main line to the hydrant. And then also some work to construct access roads to 2 properties, and then for one property to put the first layer of asphalt on the driveway through there. As indicated in the staff report, this work order has been reviewed by MnDOT and is before you this evening for consideration. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the council may have at this time.
If I may?
Yeah, please.
You said first layer of asphalt?
Correct.
So is there going to be another change order for the final?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Molitor, the second layer of asphalt for the driveway at 7515 Halsted was approved, I believe it was in November of last year, as a separate quote. So RAM would not be doing the work, but and I'd have to check to see which contractor it was, but the council has already authorized that second layer to be installed by a contractor other than RAM.
That's for both driveways?
Well, yeah, correct, both driveways are being done by a separate contractor.
Okay.
And we know that amount.
We do know that amount, I just don't have it at my
Yeah,
fingertips.
okay, that's fine. And that was approved last fall, I believe.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, good. Any other questions? Okay, so is there a motion to approve the work order number 4 for Halsted Drive Street Improvement Project in the amount of $48,198.25?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
So I just have a question. Brian, do you happen to know, are we still within the, I know that there's been a lot of work order, change orders and so on. Are we still within budget of that 5-10% contingency budget?
I think we were, well, the question comes in is, what ends up happening with liquidated damages? Because I think with this, how this project's drug on, I think the contract with this work order has gone a little more than contingency, but because it's gone so long.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm trying to say is before we would remit any of this money or any other money we owe RAM, I know we need to coordinate with WSB as far as what our liquidated damages amount updated is.
Okay.
Before, I'm fine with, if this work is satisfactory been done, I'm fine with approving the work order as is, But before any funds would be remitted, it needs to be coordinated as
When
far
you
as,
say be funds remitted, meaning,
like sent to RAM, like
Okay.
wired transaction,
Okay.
whatever, yeah, to.
but you're saying you're okay approving
There's
this?
two different things going on.
Yes,
Yeah.
there are.
Okay.
The work order, but not the.
Okay,
Yeah, the work is valid, but because the contract has gone way beyond its end date,
Yes,
they,
okay.
there's the liquidated damages factor that
which
quite
this could
possibly will
fall under.
offset this.
I'll let Ron also weigh in. I know you want to say something.
Well, Madam Mayor, Council, I agree with Brian. This is really step one of a two-step process. This is simply validating that work that was done almost a year ago was in fact properly done, and this is an appropriate price. But as you see, the last point of the recommendation is payment will come in the future. That's step two. And as far as I'm concerned, payment won't be made unless we answer the question that you're raising, which is, do we have enough left after we take liquidated damages out to make this payment? Liquidated damages will be paid first, and that's going to be a contested issue, as we've talked about a couple of times, but we'll settle up on liquidated damages before we actually pay anything out. So I think it's appropriate tonight to approve this, understanding that the actual payment of the money, some or all of this, will
May or may not. Okay.
It'll occur after we've done the rest of that calculation.
Okay. All right, well, that makes me feel a little better. All right. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, then, all those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes 5-0. All right. And then the purchase of City Hall telephone system. Mr. Barone?
Yes, Madam Mayor and council members, I'm just trying to grab my information, so in your packet, you see that we, first of all, it says that you need an upgrade Michael Barone that submitted this report, and sometimes I feel like I need an upgrade, so. The upgrade word should have been at the end of system, not in front of my name, nonetheless. I noticed that today, so.
Version 2.0?
Yeah, MB 2.0. Might be better at MB 1.0. Nonetheless, we are migrating, with approval of this particular quote tonight, migrating our system to a new NEC version. It's the kind of the next version of our phone system up. The good thing about doing that, we decided to do that because of cost, instead of just going out for an RFP and kind of scrapping the old one, doing the new one. I mean, the old one, there are still some salvageable pieces to it, but for the most part, it's essentially a new system. There are some cards that get plugged into that we can reuse. But nonetheless, we're looking at a new system. As mentioned in my staff report, we don't need to get new phones for the police department, only for City Hall. And we analyzed those phone needs. We had Brian Grimm and Anisha Mueller, and was there anybody else? The three of us. They were kind of our phone committee, and we actually went and field trip to Matrix and saw the system demoed and et cetera. So this is the phones, look at them physically instead of just looking at a piece of paper. So we were able to assess our system that we're going to replace, and as I said, we tried to come up with kind of similar for similar as far as a new phone system. We didn't want to add a lot of bells and whistles, some crazy conference calling and stuff like that. We just didn't feel as if that was going to be needed. So we've priced this system with both vendors. They're both very close. The kind of main difference here was the install. We've got a 5-year hardware warranty that gives you an automatic 5-year software warranty. As mentioned in the report, we budgeted $15,000 for this, and it's coming in substantially under that. And so, we went through and made sure, I show both quotes from both vendors that they provided me, but what I tried to do to sort of make sense of this was be able to line them up and say, here's what the costs are for the exact same system with both vendors. and make our conclusion based on that. So with that, I'll stand for any questions, but I'm looking for the motion to approve this purchase of the telephone system, and we'll keep you informed on what that means as far as installation time once approved.
Okay.
Just out of curiosity, how long will it be till we need another update?
This one will at least last us 5 years, but I think like the current one, it's been in place, it's hard to say. It's been in place for at least 10 years, this box, but we actually had a lightning strike here, I forget what year it was, and it kind of fried our system and the voicemail system, so that was replaced with the exact same system. And I know that's been at least 8 years or 9 years, so barring a lightning strike, I mean, I think it's gonna last us beyond the 5 years that it's warranted at. So we're actually past the warranty and on this one by half a year or so, but I think it'll last longer than 5 years. So.
Okay. Ms. Bruce?
I think I heard you mention, Mr. Barone, that the new telephone system might be able to come out of the communications fund. Is that what we're doing? Is we're planning to take this out of the communications fund?
I have not checked on that. We haven't designated where the funds would come from, so we can certainly research that. And I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think the funds were budgeted out of that to the equipment fund, that CIP, but I mean, I think this would be probably a valid
If it
purchase
qualifies,
out of
we could
that.
certainly do that.
We could pay for it out of that instead of or in lieu of, I guess.
That's just our call based on, but we certainly can then look into that, and we'll let council know.
Okay.
If we're able to do that. If we're not, we'll let you know.
Okay.
Good question.
Okay. Any other questions? Comments? Otherwise, is there a motion to approve the purchase of City Hall telephone system upgrade, not Mr. Barone upgrade? In the amount of $10,824.27.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion has been made by Ms. Bruce and seconded by Mr. Molitor. Any further questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes. So we'll move on to our very last business item today. And Ms. Fauske, this is a discussion of our 2020 road projects that we're considering.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Before you this evening is an updated version of the streets. I labeled it the street information packet to try to provide the council with one packet that contains all the information that staff has been mulling over as far as looking at potential project areas. A few items to note as far as what's changed in this information packet is on the cover page, we've indicated that the additional 1 inch of bituminous is included, so that reflecting council's previous approval of increasing the pavement thickness for a standard residential street. Another item to take a look at is, for example, we've provided a recommendation for 2020. And the reason we've provided a recommendation is we're looking at multiple infrastructure improvements that could be done in that Lift Station 7 force main project, which we've got the design completed and have been working to acquire the easements that we could couple that with a street improvement project so that residents in that neighborhood would have one construction project. We could have the economies of scale in that you'd get one contractor in there to get the work done, button it up and get out of there so people can have their nice new street to stand on, to drive on. So that's been included in there, as well as indicating the estimated cost for that force main replacement, just so that the council has that at their fingertips when considering options for a 2020 project. And then the previous information that we've looked at in the previous packet is also included as potential future project areas. We have the pavement corings that the council authorized to verify that the proposed project type is consistent with what they're seeing in the corings. And for the most part, we are seeing that. We did see Retreat and Sterling came back as a full pavement removal. But the reason it was actually pulled out of this packet because those streets were included in a previous assessment package for Game Farm Road. So we felt that at this time in the near future that perhaps we should hold off on looking at those streets for an improvement project. The other item that didn't change in the packet but is worth noting is the pavement corings for Morningside, Morning View Terrace. There were 2 corings taken on that street. One indicated a full depth reclamation and the other one indicated do nothing. So to be on the safe side, I've included it as a full depth reclamation for that entire area. And I think certainly it would, at the time when council would want to take a look at a project in that area, we can certainly look at what our options are. Is the whole street a full depth reclamation? Are we seeing an anomaly in one coring over the other, that sort of thing? But otherwise, the pavement corings came back consistent with what was shown in the packet previously. Also included in your packet was, again, based on the council's approval of increasing the bituminous thickness, we worked with Public Works Superintendent Peters to identify some streets that we could look at doing a 1-inch overlay and thickening up that section. So looking at more of a maintenance component to the street system. So that is included on page 137 of the packet of some potential streets we could look at doing an overlay, what the current rating is and what our estimated costs are at this time.
I just have you have Clarence Avenue as a 1-inch overlay. I don't believe Clarence is paved other than maybe there's like 200 feet or 100 feet or something. Okay, that's, just wanted to clarify that because I think also somewhere.
Same with Highland Road.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
the paved returns that we would need to
have
redone and try to save them.
Okay.
So, on the same thing, so what's the stuff that's on page 137 of the packet? Were these, if you can refresh my memory, please, were these part of the corings?
These were not part of the corings. These are in addition to, these are
kind of
first time you've seen this in this packet.
That's what I thought, because I'm a little bit concerned. We've got, I like the idea of the 1-inch overlay, but I think we've talked about this, and I assume the other thing I want to clarify, when we say overlay, we really mean just an overlay, not a mill and overlay. It's just a 1-inch over the top. I see Gary nodding his head, yes.
That's an excellent comment, Madam Mayor and Councilmember Molitor, if I may. The treatment column on page 137 indicates whether it's just the additional 1-inch of pavement, or if, for example, Scott Drive or Susan Lane indicates that there would be an edge mill.
Mm-hmm.
In order to get that next lift and in order to get that to match the edge, the elevation of the edge of the road. So it's a bit of a mix as far as.
Because I'm a little concerned. We have the second one on here as an example, and even the first one, but the second one is a really good example. We've got an OCI of 32, which normally is way down in the totally reconstruct, and we're saying put a 1-inch overlay, and I thought we were going to put the overlay on stuff that was pretty solid. So is that, it kind of looks to me like we're putting an overlay on something that may not be a good base to put it on, and maybe I'm misunderstanding the intent. Or
Madam Mayor, Council, this is kind of taking what Lee Gustafson had recommended, putting this to try to put a patch on the roads to kind of make them last a little longer, get some life out of these roads that are deteriorating, and so you have more time to play catch up basically on some of the other stuff. I kind of went through some of the shorter areas. These are short run, not some of them are longer, but like Kenny Memorial, yes, it's a bad stretch of road, but it's something to get us through for 5, 6, maybe 10 years, hopefully. So to help trying to build it. We would go in and patch it, and then come in and put this on, just to kind of prolong that life, to help these roads that are getting in that type of condition to kind of limp us along a little more, so we can do more bigger neighborhoods.
Okay, so it's not really a preventative item, like it would be in lieu of a seal coat, or like a mill and overlay, where we try to get those things before they get to be too bad. We put and maintain them. This is kind of, I don't want to, not to be derogatory, but kind of a glorified patch, if you will.
Correct, and that's what some of them are like Chateau Way. I mean, these are roads that are in there right now that need to be looked at here in the next couple of years. Same with Bertram, Preserve. They're in good shape, but it is time to look at them and say, hey, why don't we keep them in good shape? Let's look at putting that 1 inch on that type thing. There will be a little millie here or there in front of driveways to blend in. But, some of the stuff is just more of us to get us through, like Lee Guston was saying there, to get us through that, the next 5 to 10 years, so you can play catch up on the other roads. And that's why I kind of picked some of these. And, like the County Road 110 extension going up to the Gale Woods Park was never even looked at under our pavement management program. And that thing's, would benefit greatly. I mean, it's a heavily traveled road. I mean, 1 inch, even 1.5 inch overlay there, would not only improve that, coming into there, but, we would get plenty of life out of these roads. And that's what I kind of looked at, taking some of these roads that are not in the best of shape, but maybe just to get us through so we don't have to worry about the littler stuff and get on with the bigger issues that we have.
Well, let me ask you something. I didn't add all these numbers up. Did somebody do that?
777,000.
Okay, I was just going to say.
Almost 778.
Yeah. So my question is then, what's being proposed?
I think these are options.
Well, this is just options because you guys were looking for stuff that we could add, because when Lee had mentioned this, you kind of mentioned, well, what are some of the options? And here's what they are. I mean, so say we have leftover money somewhere down the road, or even like I was talking to Brian, maybe we pick a couple of these roads every year or something. We have some money in our regular street fund, the regular maintenance fund, and we do some of the areas. We have have been in communication with Northwest Asphalt just to see Wildwood Avenue, since they're right in Hunter's Crest across the street, what would they charge us to do that stretch of road? Kind of talk to them and just say, hey, what would, how close is our estimate? I mean, since you're right there, what would it cost to do that stretch on a 1 inch? And they were going to get us the numbers on that just to kind of see what it's like. These are all preliminary numbers, of course, to look at, but, in the long term, we need to start looking at some of this just to kind of, like I say, help bridge that between now and when it really needs a lot of work.
Yep.
So, I think when I read this, I was thinking about this in terms of our previous budget discussion. And just as an example, if we took, let's see, the recommended project, there's a couple different ones here, but I think it was the first one, had a price tag of...
on page 134, the 893.
There was another one. I think the second one's a little bit lower than that.
The Jennings Cove.
Jennings Cove was how much?
700,000.
700,000. So I guess when I'm doing the math on this, and if we go back and we say, okay, next year we're going to put 600,000 towards roads. What I would look at here is saying, okay, if Jennings Cove, and let's just say we chose this one, we can take the other one, whatever the number is, but 700,000, easy number to work with. If we keep our pattern of assessing half, the true cost of the city on this would then be 350,000. If we approve 600,000 for roads, I would look to see the other approximately 250,000. You'd start going down this list of maintenance items that Gary and Alyson have put together, and pick a few off of those to get us pretty close to that remaining 250. That's the way I kind of looked at it. If you go with the other one, which is 893, again, divide that by 2, you get 450, and then you take the remaining 150 off this list of mill and overlay stuff, because that stuff is not going to be assessed. That's kind of the way I viewed the overall picture of it. So I guess when
either way, I mean, there's so many projects here and so much cost here that.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
to me, it looks like this is 5 years, if not more, and even if we do it your way.
No, I mean, I don't think the intention was that we'd take all of this next year. That's why they're putting.
No,
I mean,
I'm not saying that.
This is not impossible. I mean, you look at even the first one. You're talking 900,000. the 140 comes out of the sewer fund, or stormwater, or whatever that comes out of, whatever fund that is. So you're looking at 900,000. If we're doing 600,000 for roads next year, we're assessing half, that's 450. That leaves 150,000 that we take for the overlay.
Yeah. So here's my question. Let's just take Lakeview as an example, that recommended project. How much of that project can be, how much can we use from the sewer fund to pay for the road improvement project? Because I know the road is really bad, but you do have to tear it up in order to do the sewer project. So is there any portion of that 893 that can be used for, or that we can use sewer funding from?
Madam Mayor, I think that's a good question that certainly Finance Director Grimm and I have, and other staff could have that discussion as far as, is there a portion or a percentage of that that could come from that enterprise fund to pay for that. I think we need to have a good discussion about it, make sure that we have a calculation that's defensible and
right.
that we're solid. But that, if that's something that the council would like to direct us to do, we can certainly have that discussion.
But I think one of the reasons is I think the recommended project from staff is it does sort of hit multiple. I mean, it does that needed force main replacement, as well as the streets, are in the condition where they could be definitely use the help. And then I think on page 134 it talks about here even that at least the HOA has been pretty receptive to the project, especially when you're talking assessments. That never hurts, if they understand that there is a benefit for the the road and stuff. So
yeah, when we met, Gary was talking with some neighbors over there and doing quick math in their head, and I forget what the dollar amount they said sounded good to them, but I know it was just one or two homeowners. But was it 10,000 or something? Or
well, I gave him rough numbers that we had, calculated earlier with Paul Hornby, and using those numbers is like $15,000. I think it was at one point it was $15,000 per homeowner, and the guy was like, well, if we do it for 15 years, so you're $1,000 per year for my, and he goes, well, it's kind of a no-brainer then, type deal, but just him knowing that those are just preliminary numbers
right.
And stuff, but. They seem two different people I've talked to, both on the Homeowner Association board, were very receptive to, especially since they are going to be doing some force main work there. That's why they had called to ask.
My only other comment is, and I don't disagree that we need to do that, but on the other hand, for years we've been telling people on Hardscrabble that we're going to be doing their road, and I've heard from a number of residents over there, when are you going to do it? So now we're doing this, which hasn't been on our radar screen, and it's kind of a hard sell to now go back to the people on Hardscrabble and say, oops, well, now your road isn't being done. So if you use, Mr. Molitor, your method, half of it's going to be assessed. Is there any way we could do this area and Hardscrabble? Because especially if some of the funds are going to, for Lakeview, are going to, let's say, potentially come out of the sewer fund. Obviously, the sewer project itself will come out of the sewer fund, but typically some funds are also then needed to replace the road as well. So is there any way we can get creative with our financing and do both?
Hardscrabble's $1 million.
Right, I don't see how you could do that.
So when are we going to tackle that then?
Well, I mean, we haven't decided. I mean, I think that's the point here is we've got, as I see it, three main areas. You got Hardscrabble, you got Jennings, or you got Lakeview.
Well,
and we have to make a decision on one of these three, I think.
Right. Well, on the other hand, hold on, we need to go back. I don't think Hardscrabble was $1 million. I think
that page
$498,000 is half of
Hardscrabble.
For it itself, sure.
For the whole area, I think it was.
Well, Madam Mayor, Council, if I may, this, you say it was not in the. We did present this as a option for a huge bond project. I believe it was last year already. That because they were looking for something. So I mean, it has been on the radar. Yeah. So it's not like it's something new.
No.
But so it has been on their radar, and I understand where the Hardscrabble people are coming from. But one of the hard factors with Hardscrabble, I think, too, and Ms. Fauske can help me with this, but I think it's going to end up because that center area and a lot of the area between County Road 44 and Hardscrabble is a nature conservatory area. It makes it very hard to do stuff in there, and that's going to be a big challenge. What we're going to do with the water and wetlands and stuff like that, because you can't touch that area. So I mean, it is going to be kind of a struggle in there. I mean,
But aren't you just doing a reclamation? I mean, you're not changing.
We are, but there will be some areas that are going to be impacting that area. There needs to be looked at we have major water issues as you come in and go around the south side of the circular. There's some major water issues there. Could use a pond. There's ponding issues that flood out all the time with some culvert issues in there that need to get looked at and addressed. And, and I don't know exactly how that works with the nature conservatory, because I know when a tree falls in there, we're not even allowed to pull it out of there. We can only cut what we can in the boulevard. The rest of it has to stay, and that's what.
Maybe, Ron, do you know anything about how that works? I mean, if you have to do improvements.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I don't know. I'm generally familiar with the area. It's right off of 44 that you're
Correct.
talking about. But I haven't been part of this discussion.
Yeah, I just was wondering how it's a conservation easement with it, and the Nature Conservancy. I think they own the property, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's managed by some group, and I don't know how it's going to work with that and how that plays into it. I mean, I'm sure that's going to factor into it, a lot of different things, because there is some curbing that's going to have to go in to kind of protect, because there is slopes that we're not going to be able to remove.
Right.
When we did this with Mr. Hornby, we did the same thing. When we drove through there, we noticed, there's going to be areas of curbing that are going to need to be installed to keep, any erosion problems and that stuff. So, I mean, it is kind of a major.
What I'm hearing is that the number is probably going to be a lot more than the 498. I think the 498 is just reclamation.
Probably, but I think he included, some of that in there already. So, I mean, I'm sure that if Alyson worked off their numbers, I'm assuming that's going to be in there, and there's not a lot, but I mean, there are certain areas that are going to have to be adjusted and looked at, so.
Madam Mayor, if I may, knowing some of the drainage concerns that would need to be addressed and examined with Hardscrabble Circle, perhaps that's something, if the council would like staff to take a look at, would it be palatable to look at that for a 2021 project? That, it's desirable to have that as a 2020 project, understanding that we have another project area with the sewer infrastructure need, to perhaps look at that for 2020, and then look at the Hardscrabble area for a potential 2021 project, and build upon that based on what the council would like to look at for financing for 2021.
So the Lake Shore project is on 2020 mainly because of the lift station work.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. So that's something we should definitely.
What is the urgency on the lift station?
Yeah.
Well, it's pretty urgent. Gary can tell you.
That's what we're asking.
I mean, I would I wanted to get it done this year. I mean, we are kind of nervous to go through another winter with it, the condition it is.
Okay.
So we've had breaks every year, but with, the amount of work that was to get easements and stuff taken care of, I would definitely not put it on the burner any longer than next year. I would definitely
How many
push
times
forward
did
at least to get
it
this.
break last year?
Pardon?
How many times did it break last year?
We had
Twice?
one break last year and 3 the year before.
Yeah.
And the 3 year before,
Yeah.
2 occurred within 3 days. if I
Yeah,
recall.
they were back to back of each other. So, I mean, it
I-
is,
yeah.
I think there's, for sure we know of 8 breaks in there, and Mr. Pollock, who's been here the longest tenure at the thing, he believes that there's closer to 10 to 12 that he knows of in that area.
Yeah.
So she is pretty patched up, but it was built in 1972.
Right.
City got its money's worth out of it, so.
I mean, I personally don't think that there's an option. I think we have to do the Lakeview. I was just trying to see if we could also do, the Hardscrabble. Again, using Mr. Molitor's, if it is, I'm just saying 498 for Hardscrabble and 893 for Lakeview, it's half of that approximately is 700,000. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out.
It sounds like there's, from an engineering perspective, we're not quite ready to tackle Hardscrabble in that time frame. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think there's some items that we would need to address and get some answers on before we can clearly indicate to the council that it would be a 2020 project. I think there's more questions than there are answers at this point.
And when I hear questions, I hear money. And so I think, well, no, I mean seriously. But
You see,
that-
cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching.
Right, but time
Time
is
is
money.
money.
And so I think at that point, then it kind of probably bumps us out of the category of being able to do what you just described. It gets
Right.
to be too expensive, unfortunately.
And if people know that it is on our radar for 2021, I think.
I think that's
they're gonna be-
acceptable, that.
Yeah.
I would
Well-
think just having an
Sort of
answer.
acceptable.
Sort of acceptable, yeah, that's a
Better
good.
than nothing.
But again, you can't
Yeah.
commit to anything until we know how much, but at least know that it's a top priority for 2021. I think that might
Right.
appease.
Yeah,
some.
I agree. It's, yeah, we'd like to do them both. We only have so much money, you know, sewer is pretty important. And we also have some engineering challenges that, I think it's the constraints we have.
Okay.
But if we can do Lakeview and tack something else on there, I don't know what else that would be, but.
Well,
It
like
could be
you-
some of those
some of the-
projects.
Yeah,
some
right,
of those,
right, some of
The
those.
potential overlay. and-
That's kind of where I was originally going,
Yeah.
is do the Lakeview and then.
So maybe
from
come
the
back
source.
with some, so the Lakeview area, come back and let us know how much sewer fund can be used for the actual street project, and then also come back and let us know what potentially could we do on the maintenance list that you have.
But I think, from what I'm gathering here, you want some direction. We need to move forward.
I think that's what we're saying.
But I think we've already, we already know the cost here as proposed. Now, we can talk a little bit more about what if we take more out of the sewer fund for this. But we also know that whatever's left, we've got a list that's $700,000 long of other mill and overlay that, in my opinion, you can kind of just pick off that list to fill in the gap to get to the 600,000.
So you get another 150,000 basically.
Right. And if we decide we're gonna take 100,000 more out of the sewer fund, well, then it just goes a little further down the other list.
Right.
But I think then staff has something we can start moving forward with, that if we end up, for whatever reason, not going down this, we start doing public hearings, and I guess what I'm getting to is, it'd be nice to have a plan B as well. Because of how we got, I'm not gonna say burned, but how we had to change our plans with, this year with, Oxio Circle. Kristen Lane and all that. It'd be kind of the same thing here, where, okay, if we're gonna commit tonight, which I would like us to do, to say, yes, we're gonna go down Lakeview, we start developing the communication that we wanna go out to the residents, and, if it all goes well, great. If it doesn't, we still have time to go, okay, now we had option B in our back pocket, which was, and we can decide if that's gonna be hard scrabble, maybe not, or Jennings, that might be a less engineering intensive option, but at least it gives us time to come back with another option if we need to. But that's why I'm I'd like to give us a little more solid direction rather than additional questions, because it feels to me like all we ever do with staff is give them additional questions, and
Okay,
we
Mr.
owe them
Mr. Molitor, I wasn't saying give them additional questions. I was saying if we decide to do the Lakeview, which I seem to understand that that's needed, then all they need to do is figure out how much we can use from the sewer fund, so
Right.
that we then know how many dollars we have to spend on the maintenance list.
Right.
That's,
I think we're saying
yeah. So I don't know that there's additional questions that we have other than putting together the dollar amounts or the numbers.
Okay.
So, Madam Mayor, members of council, what I'd like to provide to the council as the next step would be at the next council meeting to answer your question with regard to using, if the sewer fund could be used to finance a portion of the street costs, lay it out with regards to version 1 and 2 of the potential 2020 project that Director Grimm provided earlier this evening, so that the council can see what funds would be left over, and then compare that to some of the options that were presented as far as additional overlay for the council consideration. And with that, we would start providing a schedule to the council.
Right.
So we can start making those contacts to the residents to gauge what the resident support would be for such a project. I think we certainly on a staff level need to have a discussion about, we're at a very high level estimate stage when it comes to
Right.
Financing of these projects, which in all honesty makes me a little bit leery in reaching out to residents. But to your point, Mayor and Council, is what I've heard and what we witnessed with Kristen Lane is to establish if there's resident support for a project before proceeding with any funding and design.
Yeah.
So that would be included in the schedule. That would be
Okay, all right. Is that agreeable by the council?
Can I just add
Okay,
one
and-
comment here before you guys
Sure.
go ahead and give us direction? I'm fine with the direction you're going, but we got Mr. Hagan coming next week from Ellers to kind of talk about some new, different, creative ways of coming up with some financing. And I'm not going to say tonight that Alyson, you got 2 weeks to come up with all the ins and outs of hardscrabble. I know that's not going to happen, but I would think coming up tonight with a priority of having the one we talked about at Lakeview first, hardscrabble second, and who knows, based on the discussion that we have with Mr. Hagan, what kind of funds that we'd be able to tap into from our reserve funds, whether it's whatever fund it might be. Don't know if they're both doable next year, but I think by just prioritizing them, you've sort of set the threshold for next year is at least the first one, but if we could somehow financially swing it, maybe we can even talk about both of them. I know they're both big price tags, but as the mayor has indicated, and we've got, as recently as couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, an inquiry from, again, another person on hardscrabble saying, when are you going to fix our road? We pay a lot in taxes. And I get that, but we're hearing that from all over the city. But when you look at that one road just in itself, it's $500,000, even though the page says $1 million something, because you've got 2 other roads, Loring and one other one, which I can't read off the top of my head.
Stonebridge.
Stonebridge.
That's another $500,000. So it could, they're in the same geographical area, but you wouldn't have to do them all. You could just do hardscrabble. But that's if we can find funding sources, et cetera. But I think just prioritizing would be great for tonight, but how many we end up doing in 20, I think it's still to be determined. For sure, I think the first one, but who knows if you can do the second one. We'll find out.
Well, it would seem to make sense if you're going to be doing Lakeview that you'd want to do 1 or 2 or whatever it is along that same corridor just for efficiencies, economic efficiencies. So, my vote would be hardscrabble. It's been on there. But
I'm for Lakeview, but I don't vote.
In addition, one of the other things that's brought up here, just if we can move forward to the next one, is on page 142, Sunnyfield.
I was going to talk about that next. So can we focus on the non-MSA and then we'll move to MSA?
Okay, I thought we had.
Are we? I guess my question is: are we in agreement? Hardscrabble would be second on the list. And going down the list, would be Loring then. Is that?
I would agree.
Again, it's going to depend on financing, but.
Or where would we put the maintenance projects then?
Well, they think
we plugged them as
those are
Just
plugins.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
With the unknowns on hardscrabble, I'm not sure.
I'm kind of leaning towards Jennings.
I was just going to say Jennings.
Because Jennings is not such, that's all curb and gutter. I think all of it is.
And it's pretty clear cut.
It's pretty clear cut. And I'm a little nervous just from a cost and design perspective on hardscrabble. I realize we have the complaints, but we get complaints in the morning, we get complaints in Minneapolis Avenue, we get complaints we all know that. And not to dismiss hardscrabble, I certainly get it, that's not, but I think, to Ms. Bruce's point, that one is also a case where I think we can get, it's going to be reclamation, but I don't think it's going to be, full reconstruction. It's not.
Well, that's what's planned right now. That's what's being.
Reclamation, yes.
No,
it's full depth.
Full depth. It's full blown. Full removal. Yeah.
But the PCIs are really low.
Yeah.
Well, they are in hardscrabble too, but.
I'm just saying. I think from a planning perspective, there's just less unknowns with Jennings.
I'm not sure that that's necessarily true, but it's also 200,000 more than hardscrabble. Hardscrabble's estimated 500, and that's estimated 700.
But it would be half of that.
Yeah,
it'd be half of that for hardscrabble too.
I have more confidence in the 700 number as being solid than I do in the 500 number that's not solid on hardscrabble. I think by the time we get done with hardscrabble, we're looking at 700.
Okay, but then why not do hardscrabble then? Because you're looking at 700 here for Jennings, and if you're thinking it might be as high as 700 hardscrabble. The only reason I say that is because Jennings hasn't been on our radar screen or on the list at all.
Oh, yeah, it has. It's been on ever since I've been here.
Well,
This is 3 years.
I think, okay.
See, Gary's not in the head.
It has been on there
Yeah,
too.
okay. Anyhow, so if you, again, it's 200,000 more, which could go up too, so. Plus, I'm kind of asking or wondering, if you're going to do 2 projects, I seem to make sense to do them in close proximity. You may get more bang for your buck.
I will say that's a valid point. I mean, you can make a case either way.
So, okay.
I think there's consensus at least on the one project.
There's consensus on one.
That's a good. I wanted to state the obvious, right?
Master of the obvious.
Well, my concern would be, what more do we need to find out from whatever officials, what extra work will have to be done in hardscrabble?
Madam Mayor, members of council, I do have a note here to take a look into what kind of restrictions we would be looking at with respect to that conservation area, and follow up with the council in as timely a manner as possible, to let you know what we would be looking at for a scope, so that the council could give some direction for a 2021 project based on those preliminary findings. So I can start to look into that.
But you said
Or
2021.
2020.
Well,
But we're just, she's talking, I think you were talking about 2020.
I'm talking about 2020 as a secondary option, depending on financing.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, because I'm hearing that, and I'm 2021 is when I heard what you said, and I agree that it's just, I know from Sherwood's experience over on Shady Island or wherever they're trying to finish Tuxedo Road or Shannon Road, it's a different issue, but it's not entirely different. That once you get into these kind of situations where it's a nature conservatory, I think it's not just a phone call to somebody down the street and say, hey, what do we have to do? I think it might be a 6-month, red tape nightmare.
Yes, so looking at the versions 1 and 2 presented earlier this evening at the work session for road levy, was version 1 was 600,000 and version 2 was 525,000. If we look at the Lakeview option for, and again, understanding that we want to take a look at using a portion of the sewer fund, but just playing out the numbers that we have in the packet right now at $447,000, we're not seeing a significant amount of that leftover funding, so to speak. In order to pull hardscrabble in, we would need an additional $100,000 to $180,000 of funding for street projects to pull that hardscrabble area into 2020.
Yeah, I was going to basically comment to the same thing. I think this one project's going to eat up the vast majority, and then you're going to be able to plug in some of those other ones that's on the list. And I just don't know how. I mean, I think to focus on the one project, if the council can agree on one to start, and then see if you got to fall back to a second one versus getting too wrapped up and trying to worry about the second one right away, I think would be a better tack to do to stay on a good timeline. But my opinion, I guess so.
Okay.
So, and I think that's kind of where we were going. It was just a matter of deciding what that second one was going to be. And I think that's kind of where we were kind of having some disagreement as to whether or not that would be hardscrabble or Jennings. And what I'm hearing from Alyson is that hardscrabble would be 2021 by the time they get all the engineering stuff figured out with the conservation or the conservatory, whatever it is. That I think leads more.
Wait, let's do this. Let's leave the decision now for Lakeview Drive, and then next meeting we're going to be hearing from Ellers, and then if we want to implement any of those strategies that we're going to be talking about at our next meeting, then we can decide if we want to add more. I think, quite honestly, if we do this and we do, some of the implement any of the strategies, maintenance strategies on the list, we're going to be pretty busy.
Yeah, right.
So,
I think it was just a matter of deciding the alternative, and we
Yeah.
don't have to do that, so.
but I think at some point in the very, very near future, we're going to have to make some decisions on 2021 and let people on Hardscrabble and Loring know when we're going to be doing their road, because it's been said it's going to be next year, it's going to be next year, it's going to be next year, and we keep pushing it off and pushing it off and pushing it off. So at some point, you're going to have some very angry residents.
And I think that's what I recall a number of council people saying is, let's have a game plan. So if we have a game plan, I think we've been operating without a game plan, hoping we'd have enough money each year. And I understand it's a commitment, but I think it's better to have a game plan than not.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Oh, I have one other quick question. Alyson, on your cover sheet, it says assumes 2018 plus 18% prices plus. Why are we still working on for 2018 now that 2019 our projects are pretty well, bidded out and done?
That's an excellent question. So when I first pulled this information together, I was going based off the discussions from last year when the bids came in high, and the council direction at that time was to go and add 18% to that number so that we could look at 2019. So as we move forward in this information packet, what I'd like to evolve to is the list of assumptions will start to diminish. That council is well aware that we looked at bolstering the 2018 prices by 18% based on what we're seeing in the bidding climate. We continue to see that bidding climate. So at some point that can truncate off because we've had those discussions and we've had projects where we're seeing the prices, and that's what's been realized. So I can certainly go and start paring down my assumptions of the council's.
All right.
Can we also take a look at the inflation rate that's used in this bid? Because I looked up the inflation rate is 1.6 now, and I know for a while they were anticipating it was going to be going up, and now it looks like it's going down. And I think that might be worth revisiting.
That's another excellent point. Something that might be beneficial to the council as we move forward with budgeting is the 4% inflation is actually a construction cost index that usually runs between 3 and 4%. And I used 4% in here to be conservative because we are seeing a very competitive bidding climate. If we start to see that taper off, then we can certainly look at going down, but I would look at the industry consumer cost index as a recommendation to the council based on that.
So inflation rates aren't necessarily indicative of the construction costs because they're somewhat different, if you will.
Correct, and understanding that there's other ways to present that. There's some other edits for this packet. The next time it comes around, that's something that I can correct in there to say it's construction cost index or an inflation factor or something like that. So it's not inflation on the economy as a whole. So it's a little more transparent.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much. With that concludes our road discussion. And
No, I think we're going to talk about state aid highway.
oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. It's getting late. So, MSA page.
I think it's like 140.
Hold on.
145 maybe.
Is it
142?
142, I think it is. Yeah. Okay.
So included on page 142, you see at the council's request, we've provided some high-level estimates for some options to look at and redesign. One being the roadway expansion to accommodate turn lanes, parking lanes, and a gravel shoulder, and the other one with a concrete curb and gutter with some storm sewer improvements, so that the council can go and the council will have those numbers to ponder when looking at some direction on what to do with that project.
So, yeah. Okay, go ahead.
So, as Alyson mentioned, we'll need to have a discussion with the district, but when I look at this, and I'm just going to use the higher number, just to be conservative, and let's say that's what we want to do. And it's 960, and I'm just going to round it up for $1 million for ease of math. If we would follow our normal practice, we would assess half of that to the district, so $500,000. That leaves $500,000 for the city. We have in here, and I forget the exact number, but I want to say it's about 1.3 in MSA money. That means the city basically could pay our half with MSA money right now. So, is there a reason why we wouldn't want to just move this thing along? Because
It's the school's budget, I think.
well, yeah, but I mean, assuming that part, but from the city side,
I think we'd want to do Sunnyfield. So I think from that perspective, we'll want to move it along. I think the question remains, does the school want, and I think this might be part of our discussion, do we want a turn lane? I think that would be more our discussion with the school. The parking would be a school discussion solely. I mean, do they want this parking? At what cost is that?
Sure.
The turn lanes is our discussion, I think, in part. Is that a safety issue? Is it good for their community? That kind of discussion.
It's all of our discussion, right?
Right.
But regardless of that, and we need to have those discussions, but I'm talking about from a finance perspective, the school district's going to have, let's just, again, say 50%, whatever that number is, whether it's the 775 or the million or whatever the number is. Our half, I'm thinking we would pay for all of that with MSA money,
Right.
which we currently have available.
Right. That's what, it was always planned that way, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
but then it's kind of, I don't want to say, it's not a no cost, but it's not a levy issue for us.
Correct.
So, it'd be nice if we could kind of move this one along.
Well, the only thing we can't move along is we have to find out from the school district, do they want the parking on one side? Do they want the 2-foot wide gravel shoulder? Or, well, I guess that may not be an issue, but do they want the turn lanes? I think that would just be the question. It wouldn't be a question of whether or not we're going to do it.
Okay.
Is 2021 the year they're looking at doing it?
I think that's
Yeah,
what the point is here about this, they need to get in their budget. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, mayor and council, because their calendar fiscal year is different than ours. When we discussed this, I believe, May, June, I want to say, we notified them that it wouldn't be done any sooner than 2021. So I think if we, I think in the timeline that's mentioned on page 10 of this, page 142 of the packet, that, we can define this early next year with the school district.
We can start this fall.
You could start
Yeah.
this fall.
I would.
I agree.
Yeah.
But there's going to have to be a lot of communication. I do know that, what was it, a year ago, Mayor?
Yeah,
You
probably.
and I and
Yeah.
Alyson and David went over and talked to the superintendent, and,
No.
as understanding as he is of what's taken place here in Minnetrista as far as how people have been assessed for projects, as you guys know, it's always different depending on the project and scope and everything, a lot of factors. And just to pluck a percentage, like I want to get whatever these guys got on this street, is not factual. I mean, there's going to have to be an education process to talk about how much would be assessed. I heard Mr. Molitor tonight say 50. I don't know if that's the number, but it seems like a good place to start, and that's what we have. I think I've even heard Ms. Bruce talk about a higher amount in a previous council meeting. So, where we end up with this, I think, is something that we're going to have to strategize about before we start playing this out with the school district. And, if that requires maybe a meeting with them sometime later this year, early next year, joint meeting to discuss this project, we could do that. But I think we're going to have our ducks in a row. And as the mayor just mentioned, we should know the cost of each one of those factors, whether it's a turn lane or a parking lane. And
I think
gravel.
we've got those costs now, right?
But that, as a group.
Overall, we have 775 if
Yeah.
you went with that one, with the top option.
I mean, we can do the math and figure out the
We
curb
just
and
need to
gutter,
know
but, I mean,
and have
how much-
discussions with them, yeah.
I don't know how much the turn lanes are compared to the parking.
Well, I don't know if we have to come out with a full à la carte menu here. I mean, I
No,
think
but-
we've got a couple things here, and we've got a couple options. It's going to be one of those two.
Yeah, and, that may sway them one way or the other to do what they got to do to budget for it if that's what they want, so.
Right.
So this is for 2021.
Right.
However, we do have $1.3 million, as you mentioned, in the kitty right now, and we get a little over 251, I believe it was. So that would put us over the 1.5 for 2020. So I do think we should look at something for 2020.
Well, I mean, to the budgeting on this here, Brian, on the timing of the assessments, doesn't it actually, like they actually start paying the assessment in the following year? Is that how that works?
Yeah, so if we did this project in 2020, we'd certify it.
2021.
No, keep going with your, you're going down the path I want you to go.
Okay.
Walk through that.
Yeah, so I mean, if the project was done in 2020.
Yes.
And if we certify it to the county by November 15th or whatever it is, they would make their first payments in 2021.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
With the property, or tax.
Right, okay.
Yep.
That's what I want, because to your point about using the MSA funds, then you could use them in 2020, and we wouldn't hit the limit where we start losing funds.
No, we wouldn't be using them in 2020. We wouldn't be using them until 2021.
Well, if we did the project in 2020, wouldn't we start using them in 2020?
We're not going to do the project in 2020. This is a 2021 project.
Well, I'm asking, can we make it a 2020 project?
Well, as I mentioned.
Or do you think that's too long, we can't?
I think we could do it. I don't know if they can do it.
Okay.
I think
based on what we told them already.
So are you asking, can we spend our money now and let the school spend their money in 2021?
Well, that's kind of what would happen,
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying, we know what the project is, we know where our funding, we're gonna split it, but we know that we're not levying for its MSA money. And, they won't, regardless of, the earliest they would actually ever make a payment is 2021. It might even be 2022 if we do the project in 2021. It's always a year lag. So from their budgeting perspective, they'd still have time to budget for it. It's just a way to get the project done in 2020.
Use the money.
Use the money, we don't hit the cap. It's just a thought. If we can, we might still have some disagreement over the particulars, but I think in general we have the concept.
Right, but let me ask Ms. Fauske then, all of the design work would have to be done like soon, and I think we kind of put it on the back burner thinking we were going to do it in 2021. So then the question is,
right,
can we get it designed and actually do the construction in 2020?
Madam Mayor and Council, I think it would be a challenge at this point for this to be a 2020 project. A couple of things is, particularly if you're looking at expanding the roadway, the design involved with that, of course, that expands your design time. We're here at the beginning of August. A best case scenario to get started on design would be, early September. We want to start bidding projects earlier. We would not be able to do that with this particular project. And we also have, because it's a state aid project, we would have state aid review that would need to go in the hopper as well. So that would really be pushing our bid date out with that. Another item that I'd like to bring to the council for consideration too is on a staff level, we've had some discussion about some MSA funds for over on North Branch Road where there's some culvert and ditch work that Superintendent Peters has pointed out. So that would also be an opportunity to look at some maintenance of an existing state aid route that we could look at requesting some funding for that as well. But I don't have any dollar signs for you at this point because we've just had that as a side discussion as we focused on the remainder of the 2020 projects that we've discussed with the council.
So that kind of leads me to my question. So there's a couple of state aid roads like Halstead Drive, and it says mill and overlay, for instance, 265. Is that a long process and how do you say, do you have to do a lot of engineering to do mill and overlays on a MSA road?
A mill and overlay would not be as design intensive because your project corridor is staying the same. So you would still have some design work associated with that, and I'm not, to be honest with you, I'm not sure how long the state aid review process would be in that, but we would certainly, just running some quick numbers through my head, I think from a schedule standpoint, we would still be pushing a later bid time. I want to say March, perhaps April.
Okay.
I'd certainly have to discuss with some of my colleagues as far as what the state aid timeline is for a mill and overlay review.
Okay.
What if we were to use the MSA dollars on the design work for Sunnyfield? How much would that take up?
So you can start your state aid eligible expenses I believe those don't start getting distributed until your project has started. So while they're state aid funding eligible, you don't recoup those costs until the project is realized, until you've gone into a construction phase.
So you can't get part of it now?
Not, it'll be eligible, but you don't get it until there's actually been a project led for that and fund, and the funding request for the construction.
I think Halstead, we got it all in one lump sum not too long after we let the project, or awarded the project, or it was maybe a little bit into it or something. We got the money we had requested after we'd done all the paperwork and stuff. So.
Okay, so.
Back to square one.
If the council would like, I can certainly have some answers, with regards to if there's a desire to look at a mill and overlay on the remainder of Halstead Drive, and then have a further discussion with potential culvert and ditch work on North Branch Road, and have some high-level cost estimate for that for the council to consider for MSA funding, and then look at some scheduling with those options as well.
The other road that I know has came up in the past in my time here is North Arm, which is on that page 144.
Right, that's there, right.
That's came, and that would, that's at the estimated cost about $500,000.
I know, I was only thinking in terms of time frame to design it. The Halstead Drive one is a lot shorter, it's maybe half the length, I'm guessing.
Well, and I also like the Halstead Drive.
Then it's finished.
Then it's finished,
Yeah,
right. Because right now, we've got a brand new road and then we've got junk.
And that's the other reason I was looking at
right,
that.
and North Arm is its own animal.
Yeah.
But I think, to your point, Elsa, I think it would be nice to do the Halstead Drive.
So what, if you could do that, then Halstead, and then come back with some culvert work on North Arm. And then maybe what we do, depending on our dollar amount, maybe we do Sunnyfield and North Arm together in 21. That might be an option.
We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying that might just keep it in the back. Okay. All right. So are we in agreement then? Come back with Halstead, mill and overlay on the remainder of Halstead? And
I think that gets us to use some of the MSA money. And it fits in with our previous work there.
I think financially that's good. It's a little interesting that they begged out of the project a couple years ago. I think originally they were part of the project, and remember they sort of peeled off, but whether
it is what it is.
It is what it is. All right. Okay. I think we're good to go on our MSA. Anything else, staff? Okay. Then now we have completed our road discussion, and next we move on to administrative items. Staff reports, Mr. Barone.
I have one item to share with you, Council. So as you recall, we had a number of residents here from the neighborhood near where the bridge work was being done as part of the County Road 44 project, and they had some concerns about chemicals in their wells, et cetera. So Chris Remus sent me a email to follow up with me on August 1st, last Thursday, and he said that 10 residents did take them up on their request to pay for a evaluation of their water, and I think there was 40-some, so it wasn't a high percentage. But nonetheless, Pace Analytical was the group that was hired. So there are 4 constituents that were reported as non-detect, meaning they found no evidence of the chemical in the well, or all the wells. But in 7 of the 10 wells, they found 1 chemical, but I'll explain it to you. So the item the chemical that was found was called sodium persulfate. It's an EPA-accepted green alternative that is used in well remediation, just like they were working on, and also used in food preservatives. Levels detected were well below EPA levels, which are set more for water aesthetics than for toxicity. So based on these test results, and in conjunction with the results being reviewed by the Minnesota Department of Health and the Hennepin County Health Department, they expressed no concerns with the test results. His email was if you receive any homeowner questions, let me know, and they'll be happy to answer them, and I've received none. So I don't know if they called directly, but like I said, they found this one chemical, and again, it's essentially something that's used as a food preservative, so it's not like we probably all haven't eaten it.
Wonder
it's
how it got in the wells.
Well, it was probably part of the process,
Huh.
true. It was probably part of that process, but again, it's part of that chemical that's inert, so.
Okay.
It's,
Okay.
so they weren't concerned, the other two agencies, one county and one state, were not concerned, so. And they've given, the 7 people that did give this persulfate, sodium persulfate, they've been notified. So they're well aware of it, so.
Okay.
And I don't know the outcome of that, but, it seems fairly minor, so, that they're not concerned, all these state agencies and county agencies, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
I apologize, Mayor, I'm just going to interrupt for a moment. We still do need to take a break at 9 to switch.
Okay. All right. Five
If you-
minutes?
Unless there's a different option, but
Okay.
the
Yeah.
tape will run out.
Okay. 5 minutes. We have Alyson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Some quick updates with our street projects. The 2019 project, they're currently in the mill and overlay area. So they have all of the concrete work, concrete curb and gutter has been replaced. Topsoil's been installed, and then they'll hydro seed. The next area will be City Hall, and we've been working with the contractor to come up with a schedule on that, and I can provide the council with an update on that. The next project I'd like to bring you up to speed with is Enchanted and Tuxedo. The restoration contractor was out there. The work was not satisfactory. Staff walked the area with the project manager from Valley Paving, our contractor, and they agreed. And they are taking the necessary steps to go and make that work acceptable. So that is on its way to resolution. And Halstead Drive, I will be going through the corridor either tomorrow afternoon or Wednesday with the inspector to take a look at the work that RAM has completed so far. They still need to go and install the truncated domes on the trail. They want to look at doing that the week of the 16th, and then we'll be in continuing conversations with legal with regards to liquidated damages. And another item with regards to Halstead Drive that I just wanted to mention to the council, we do have a restoration work that was done on one of the properties over on Halstead earlier this year. Unfortunately, after the contractor finished spreading topsoil and seeded, it rained and washed the seed away. The property owner requested sod. We called around to find pricing, and we had a price of approximately $4,000 to sod, which is between, to seed it would be about a third or to a half of that. So I indicated to the property owner that I was not comfortable going and making an administrative decision to go and spend money on sod. No one else on the project has sod. So if there's anything that I can come back to the council with more information, I'd be happy to do that, but I just wanted to let the council know that.
When they seed, do they hydro seed?
We can do a hydro seed. This one was not.
I know it's a steep slope, so I'm just wondering, because if they put seed down and then we get another rain event like today, for instance, we're going to be back in the same situation. So I don't want to keep, I understand your concern and I don't disagree. I just don't want to keep seeding and keep seeding and keep seeding. So if they, I don't know if hydro seeding would help, or if there's an overlay that they do, a cover.
Yeah, so you could put a blanket on it, an erosion blanket on it would be another option. So we can certainly look at those options. I just wanted council aware of the request that was made. If there's some additional information that you'd like me to bring forward, I'm certainly happy to do that. But if there's a feeling one way or another with regards to sod, I would look to the council for direction on that.
Anybody have an opinion?
Just to chime in a little bit, the fact that nobody else received sod was important to me when we discussed this at staff level. I understand the guy's frustration. That's I think one of the reasons he stated to both Gary and Alyson that he would like to get sod instead of seed. Well, I felt like saying if I was talking to him, join the club. We're all frustrated with what's going on with RAM, et cetera. So I wish I could just wave a magic wand and say, sure, $4,000, good idea. But I think we're better off taking a crack at it with hydro seeding or other way to seeding, trying to line it up with the weather reports. Hopefully when we put it down, we're not going to get an inch of rain like we did today or whatever it was. And if it fails, we'll discuss the S.E.H. But I know he's probably one of the more sloped properties out there, so that's an issue. But I think we take a crack at the seed and save ourselves a few $1,000. So.
Okay. We're in agreement?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so we do have to take a break. It is 9 o'clock, so we'll take a 2-minute break, sorry, and then come back quickly so that Gary can finish up and go home.
Gary's not the only one that wants to come.
No.
Okay, we're back. Mr. Peters.
Madam Mayor, Council, just want to give you an update on an issue that we've had for quite a while here. Lift Station 1, which is located on County Road 110 North between R&S Collision and River Valley Church there on the east side of the road, is our highest pumping volume lift station that we have in town. That flows, the force main runs down 110 all the way to the regional trail where it picks up and drops into the Met Council line there. We've been running into issues with this for the last 2 years now. It's really getting worse here as we expand more with the water treatment plant running. The backwash, when the backwash is at the treatment plant, the discharge goes into Lift Station 1, which is causing some issue with it not being able to keep up. What compounds this issue is when Lift Station 2, farther up the street, discharges at the same time, we run into a major issue where the pumps cannot keep up. So what ends up happening is each pump, one goes on one time, and then the next time the other one. So one goes, two goes, one goes, two. So it switches and alternates pumps. In high demand situations, it calls for lag, so both of them go on. And we're having an issue with both of them even keeping up. So we did some research, talking, and this was not even, I don't believe, on S.E.H's radar when this went on. I don't think anybody thought this would be an issue downstream. Talked to WSB's engineering there and stuff, and some of the issues that came up was, the panel would need to be redesigned. We would need to upgrade pumps, upgrade panels, and stuff like that. So I mean, anybody, and I talked to some other companies, and they were talking anywhere from $75,000 to $150,000. Well, I took it upon myself to do some research. We contacted 3 different vendors that we have for pumps, kind of explained what our situation was and what they could do for us. And we got some pricing on some different pumps that could go in there with minor upgrades to the panel and without having to change out a lot of components. Tri-State Pump came up with the best solution that we felt would work and they thought would work, looking at what we have for distance, what we have for head pressure and all this. So a lot of it was all calculated and taken in. We replaced our 15 horsepower pumps at the station. They were kind enough to give us one to test, a 23.5 horse, to try. It did require, I think it was $3,100 in upgrades to our panel, which included some new breakers and some new starters, which we needed anyways because they were starting to go as these pumps click on and off so much, they're starting to wear. So they were good enough to give us, a brand new $17,000 pump to put in there and try. They came in, they did everything, we put everything in. And what we had was, we were pumping at a rate of 430 to 440 gallons a minute at our current rate. We were hoping to get up to 600. What WSB was saying, we should, be thinking of 2040. They want to be looking at 1,200. Well, we don't need that right now. So what they were trying to get us up to is that 600-700 range. It's been pumping for a month. And to relay this, what happens when it goes into alarms, so that when both of them go on, it triggers a lag pump alarm, and it triggers through our SCADA system and as a service call out, which says that the lift station should be checked to make sure there is not something wrong. That why did the second pump kick on? It's a safety feature, which is perfect. But it used to be a 2-hour call out per guy. Now it's a 3-hour call out per guy, and we were getting some of these times 3, 4, 5 times a month. So it starts to add up just with on call. So anyways, with the new pump that was put in there, we tested it out to see how it was going to react. We went and did some new drawdown numbers, and we went from roughly, the last one we looked at was 432 gallons a minute on a pump. We were 877 gallons a minute on this new pump. It's anywhere from 860 to 880 gallons per minute. We've contacted the Met Council. They're aware they actually are aware of our flow increase. We've not changed any of the head pressure or anything like that. It's just we've increased flow. So they're adjusting their meter to work with us on this. But the good news is basically for, which is in our budget already through the CIP, for basically $30,000, we can upgrade a lift station that'll be serviceable now for the next 10 to 15, 20 years without having to redo the panel and all that. So, which is good news for us. So we're going to be eliminating, we have not, since this has been in for the last 5 weeks, we have not had one call out on it, which is perfect. And that's what we're looking for. So that's a good success. So we'll be working with them, and we have the money in the CIP budget for upgrades for this. It's a win-win for everybody. So the other thing I just want to update you on is Slow Creek Park. The trail was supposed to be redone 2 years ago. We ran into an issue with timing and that stuff, so we put it off till last year. But when they started to remove the trail, we found out there's a large section that did not have base material under there. So talking with our contractor, it was late in the season. We decided to put it off to this year, and basically talking with GBT Blacktopping, talked to them what they wanted to do, if we were going to send off for rebid. Basically, we made an agreement with them if we could help them haul in some rock and we'd help them base the trail as they removed it, they would do it for the same price. It's great. The trail now has been paved, where it was only paved to the playground, is now paved all the way to the bridge. And as it turns out, kudos to them. They did a lot of extra work with no extra charge. They had to bobcat all the mix in. We could not back a truck in there because one of the neighbors did not want them edging onto their yard slightly, even though we do have kind of an easement there. So they were very good about, Mike Jones is very good about taking and bobcatting in all the mix.
What's the name of the company that did
GBT Blacktopping. They're those same ones that have done the driveways out there.
Okay.
They've done our well 7 driveway. They've been great to work with. I gave them very good kudos because that was a lot of extra work and they didn't charge extra for it.
Nice.
So the trail is done there. We'll have some black dirt and seed work to do, but the grand scheme of things, it worked out great for us. So two accomplishments that we got done this year that I'm really happy about. They're really happy in Sunnybrook, and we just are really happy about Lift Station 1 because it's really going to help us out in the future. So.
Excellent. Thank you, Gary. Thank you for your work too and efforts. Okay. So moving on to council reports, we'll start with Ms. Bruce.
I attended the Mound Fire Commission meeting with Mr. Barone, and I'll just keep it short because it's all in your information packet. Their budget for 2020 is going up 2.64%, and Minnetrista's increase is 2.69%, and it's $317,662 is what our payment's going up, but it's all in the packet, and you can see it there. That's all I have.
Okay. Mr. Tschumperlin?
I attended the July Planning Commission meeting. Also attended a special Pioneer-Sierra Creek subcommittee that was formed to discuss our change in engineering situation with the commission. Mr. Olson attended from Minnetrista. Out of that, we're taking a recommendation back to the commission to issue letters of interest to, I think, up to 5.
It was like 5 or 6.
5 or 6 engineering firms to see what comes out of that, whether they want to deal with that or not. And then another discussion, which there was no resolution on yet, but the potential that the change in engineering costs might be passed on or have some process set up so the cities pass it on to the developers and or landowners, depending on what we find the engineering costs to be. So that'll be discussed at our next meeting, which I'll be attending on August 15th.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks. Okay. Mr. Molitor?
No updates to report at this time.
Okay.
There was no July WCC meeting, and I have not received a date for August yet.
Okay. Just a quick question. We had talked back in June about the short-term rentals, and we had some issues there. We said we'll kind of wait and see what happens and then bring it back for council discussion. Do we want to have a closed session maybe at our next meeting at the end so we can see where we're at?
Well, go ahead. Before you answer that,
Okay.
I want to make sure that we can even have a closed session.
Well, that was going to be my question. The only way you can have a closed session is to consider litigation. And that was the basis of closing the previous meeting. If that's still what we're talking about, then you can have a closed session. But if it's a broader policy question, then that's not the basis for closing a meeting.
Okay, well,
I guess the threat is still there, but
Yeah.
it doesn't seem very imminent since this
Yeah.
is what, May? You know, and it's August. I don't think they're going to sue us. So.
right. Anyhow, so I think we'll have to bring it back for some kind of further discussion. Unless you just want to let it keep going.
To me, no news is good news. I think the ball's in their court.
Well, okay.
Do we have?
Are,
Sorry, go ahead.
sorry. Are we, okay, I understand what you're saying, but I don't know if that's exactly what you're getting at, because it's not just the legal action you're talking. I assume you're talking beyond the legal action and the complaints in general about the issue. Or
Well,
are you talking just about the legal action?
Both.
Okay.
I mean,
Then it's not just no news is good news, because
Right.
there's complaints on the other side.
right.
Now, there was some discussion around that topic. I don't know if we have, what's the talk about, I guess.
Well, I mean, to kind of chime in a little bit on this. So, Mr. Funderburk is the person that lives next to the Airbnb home that's being rented out. And he's been in contact with city staff, including Mr. Falls, Chief Falls, and saying, is there anything you can do? The last direction we got from the city council was, let's just see what happens. So we didn't really decide to change course. And he asked to meet with us. He asked the mayor if we could meet, so we met. It was David Abel, Chief Falls, Lisa, Whalen, myself. And, you know, we essentially told him what the council has told us as staff to do. It's essentially just kind of monitor what's going on. And if something changes, we can certainly talk about it. But his frustration, obviously, was not with, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, but not that there was like loud, boisterous parties going on. It's a nuisance to him to have that many people coming and going, living next to it. But not that they were loud or out of control, but just the fact that they're, in his opinion, violating the 30-day rule, because he thinks there's people there every week, different people there every week. So they're obviously saying, na boo-boo, you know, catch me if you can. So, but again, that's his take on it. We don't know for a fact that that's the case, but it could be. So those are the only thing that's really different. And so if the council wants to talk more about it, whether it qualifies for a closed session or not, you know, I think that we're up for the discussion if that's what you'd like to do.
You know, I, just like if you suspect someone has drugs in their home, you have to have some probable cause or some proof to enter their home and to enforce an ordinance or to I guess what I struggle with is until we have some proof that there's been a violation of our ordinance, I don't see that there's any steps for us to take. And we don't have any proof that our ordinance has been violated, at least from the last time when I asked that.
Well, yeah, and I haven't given you the full thrust of it, but essentially, Chief Falls, I know that they've been looking at this thing online, and you can see the calendar for the house, and I guess you can kind of tell that there might be different people there every week. Now, that's just our view at the internet, but I think that's correct.
Right, Madam Mayor, members of the council, I think that's exactly correct, and I think we've done some very, very preliminary, you know, just like anyone can do, go on the website and look, and it appears as though on the calendar it is rented out pretty much every weekend, or at least over the summer months. But that's about as far as you can get. That in and of itself really isn't proof, but the issue will become how do we enforce that, which is going all the way back to the discussion as to whether or not you wanted to adopt the ordinance in the first place. That's kind of the challenge. And so to do that, it doesn't make a lot of sense to start digging in if we're not going to, in fact, enforce that. And this particular property is probably more sensitive than others for reasons we've already stated. But with that said, there really isn't much more we can do other than that unless we're willing to literally investigate further, and then whether we send a letter saying this is what it appears you're doing, and that if you are, that's in violation of the ordinance. The bottom line is we need to be ready to take the next step then if we're going to do that. And so that's kind of where we left it, unless we're directed to do otherwise. And as we know, that can be simply issuing a citation isn't probably going to fix the problem, given the nature of it. So it would likely result in further legal action, which is timely or time intensive and expensive, as you know. So that's kind of where we sit.
Well, and it sounds like this might be a longer conversation than a staff report, so I would support having a work session on it.
That was going to be my recommendation. If you have interest in discussing maybe this one specifically or in general, a work session might be the best place to have that discussion.
Yep, we can, okay, we'll do that. And that would kind of tie and dovetail in, too, with the previous comment by Mr. Atkinson regarding maybe, do we have proof that it should be maybe rezoned, or not rezoned, but reclassified as a commercial versus residential?
Well, I think
discuss
that's
that
going to be
too.
up to the county, and I don't think they've even begun that process.
Yeah.
They just got notified by the Department of Revenue in late May. So I don't think we've been contacting planning about changing the tax code or whatever, or reclassifying. I think that's something.
I don't think we have to do that, that's what.
I get that, but I don't
yeah.
think they've done anything, is my point, so.
Okay, so we'll.
Because they're looking at it on a countywide basis, not
Yeah.
just us, so.
So do we have room on the August 19th work session?
Well, Mr. Hagan's coming for at least part of it. We're going to talk some more budget stuff for at
Right.
least
Maybe
a
then
chunk
it'd
of
have to
it,
be
or-
September?
More budget. I guess what we'll have to throw out here is maybe it's another 5 o'clock start. I don't know if that's amenable to the council members, but it could be like tonight where you give them 30 minutes to talk about it, and then we move on to our budget stuff. I think the budget to me is a higher priority, not
Sure.
that this isn't, but we could do that.
Okay.
And if it's not this meeting, we'll do the next one, so.
You want to do 5 o'clock start or September?
Well,
We always
the-
have stuff.
Yes, because summer's going to be over. So to do anything really, do they rent these out throughout, probably throughout the fall? right?
Probably throughout the fall. I mean,
But,
yeah.
you know,
Right.
traditionally, Labor Day is the end of summer.
Yeah.
Well, end of summer, so they may still have some rentals in September, but, so.
So
we'll
bring
have
it
to-
back September?
That's
Why
All
don't we
right.
do that?
First meeting September work session. All right. All right, that's all I have. So with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion passes 5-0.